This episode is sponsored by Fantasy Flight Games. To episode 35 of the Board Game Geek podcast, where we geek out about board games, the mechanisms behind them, and the people who create them. I'm your host, Candice Harris, and I am super pumped to be here today with game designer Tricky Reiner, or maybe it's pronounced Table Reiner? No. I think it's actually Taylor Reiner from Taylor's Trick Taking Table, which is an awesome YouTube channel dedicated to trick taking, climbing, shedding games, and other card games. How's it going today, Taylor?
It's good. Yes, it is. It is me, not one of my many personas. But thank you so much for having me. This is going to be so much fun.
Yeah, I always love ever since I don't remember when I first met you. It might have been in Portland at PGC Con last year, but we met online. So. We talk online and stuff. And I've been a fan of your YouTube channel for a while. I don't remember how it popped on my radar, but I love trick taking games. And you are the main content creator that's really covering these kind of games. So it's really awesome.
Cheers. Yeah. Actually, through BGG was kind of how I started. I love seeing videos for games, and trick taking games didn't have many videos. It seems to be a genre that was in obscurity, but didn't have much coverage. And so I was like, let's just make videos as much as I can for trick taking games.
Heck yeah. And didn't you just go to the Tokyo Game Market in December, the last one? How was that?
Yeah. It was so amazing. So Tokyo Game Market it happens twice a year in Tokyo, in the name. And
surprise.
They have, surprise. That'd be great if it was in Kyoto or something. But they have all these wonderful new, fresh ideas. And just because Japan loves, kind of smaller form games and
sure.
trick taking, usually just cards, it kind of lends itself well to having a ton of trick taking games there.
Yeah.
And a lot of the ones I think we're going to be talking about are from the recent fall Tokyo Game Market.
Cool.
So it was so much fun. I had a booth there. I matched up with another Japanese designer, and we got to meet so many other wonderful Japanese designers that would come up to the booth and say hi and
awesome.
Get the game. And it's such a lovely back and forth. It seems like all the designers who are in trick taking voraciously love seeing other trick taking designs. It's such it's like almost
welcoming community, encouraging and supportive.
100%. And
that's awesome.
It might be something to the genre where it's so quick that you can play so many in a night, that they also have game nights where they're showing each other, let's play Hand of Mine, play Hand of Yours. And so there's a lovely community of seeing each other's ideas, and it's kind of like a slam, like a poetry slam, where you're like, let's play
Trick taking slam.
Trick taking slam. Yes, exactly. So it was just
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I really want to go at some point. But you had your game, Short Zoot was there, right?
Cheers. Yes. I had Short Zoot, and that one was art by the lovely Sai, who does so much in the Japanese art realm.
Yes.
I was walking around with her once, and I think she said a quarter of the games had her art one year.
That's amazing.
So she's like the Ian O'Toole
of the trick taking world. Yeah.
Yes. And in fact, actually, Ian O'Toole was one of the people highlighted at the con at Tokyo Game Market. Did speeches and stuff. And he came up and
cool.
Yeah, it was a funny story. I didn't know what he looked like. I hadn't seen I've seen his art a ton, but I didn't know what he looked like. He came up to the booth to get some of my games. I was like, hey, nice to meet you. What's your name? He's like, oh, I have a reservation. What's your name? And he's like, Ian O'Toole. But he wrote it in Japanese. So when I was looking it up, I was like, what is it? And he's like, it's Ian O'Toole, in hiragana. So I was like, oh my gosh, it's Ian O'Toole.
That's so cool. Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
It was wonderful.
Awesome. So Taylor and I just recently returned from a gaming event that was mostly focused on trick-taking games, and I'll say trick-taking style games, climbing shedders, all sorts of different card games. And I recently realized that all trick-taking style games are not created equally when it comes to complexity. So today, we're going to discuss complexity in trick-taking games, and we're going to talk about some of the most interesting and awesome games that we played at this retreat. So Taylor, I ran into a situation a few months ago where I was still last year I got introduced to RoboTrick. And for those who don't know, I think I've mentioned it on this podcast before, but in case you're not familiar, don't recall, this is a 3-player trick-taking game where a 3-player only game where your 4th player is a robot, an AI opponent. And there's this deck of these programming cards that tell you how this robot Droco plays. And this is a game where you only want to win 3 tricks each hand, because the minute you go over, you start taking cards and they're going to be negative points. And if the robot wins a trick, they're negative points. So it's this really fun and can be punishing game. And I love it. And I'm like, this is such a clever, awesome design. I love it, love it, love it, even when I'm awful at it. And I was excited to play it. And I had some friends coming over and we had 3 people. So I'm like, oh, let's play this game, RoboTrick, because I'm all hype about it. And after they played it, they were a little not as excited about it as I was. And I realized because sometimes when you say to people hey, we're going to play a trick-taking game, the assumption is it's going to be something light, a fun little light card game. And this one is definitely thinkier. So so I have now been thinking about that more and trying to know my audience and not just throw any trick-taking game at them. Right. Yeah, and I know you play so many, so I'm you're a good person to talk to about this stuff.
Oh, totally. Because I will also even the term trick taking, it can mean so many different things to so many different people. I know people who have grown up with their grandparents or parents playing bridge, right? And that's probably one of the more complex trick taking games.
Yeah,
it had
which I've still never played, but yeah.
It's something to where I'll say, do you want to play a trick taking game with someone? And if they're familiar with the bridge, they're like, oh, I don't want to play. It's too complex. Or someone who isn't familiar with trick taking, they'll look at the box size, and how generally box size might have a correlation to game length, game complexity, rules. The weight of the game. And so sometimes the fact that they're just cards is a deceiving, it's like a small package, how much could be in this. And sometimes you're like, oh, there's a lot of bidding and a lot of guessing what's going to happen when you don't really know what's going to happen. So yeah, I'm definitely familiar with that. And I think kind of what players bounce off of in terms of rules or complexity or exceptions is something that I'm aware of. Yeah.
Super familiar with. Yeah. So I was also thinking of it in terms of music. I know I like a lot of out there music. I like a lot of progressive music. And, I remember I feel when I said let's play RoboTrick, I was putting on this heavy prog rock album and they were looking for radio friendly pop or something. Yes. And I remember this game night I went to play with the people at Tom's Game Brain game night. And I was oh, I love this drummer Nate Wood from Kneebody. And, Kneebody's this fusion band, probably a little progressive musically. Yeah. But totally. The drummer he's like an alien, this wizard drummer who plays every instrument. I shouldn't just call him a drummer. He's he can play all these instruments, and he recorded this album where he plays all of the instruments. He even has live videos where he's playing bass, keys, and drums at the same time, live playing these songs. And I was I was just listening to his album, which I think is called 4. And I put on a track. I had them put on a track at game night, and I'm just oh yeah, this is great. These drum beats are awesome. Right. And then one of the guys there was just oh, I can't stand this. And I'm oh, not everybody is vibing on what I vibe on sometimes.
Oh, like different rhythm signatures, or it was levels that
Yes.
you appreciate. Yeah.
Yeah. So I try to be more aware of that, like when it comes to games and music, knowing your audience a little bit. But anyway, but before we start getting into like complexity and trick taking games and talking about some of the awesome games we played last weekend, I'd love to hear what you've been playing lately, Taylor, outside of the trick taking realm. So let's jump
Yes.
into fresh plays.
Awesome. Yeah. So I have been playing, even though I have been playing a lot of trick taking games, some non-trick taking games. The first one that I played, and this was actually at the retreat that we were just at, it's called Maze Makers. And I think it's some of the people who did Make the Difference by Oink. So if you've seen that one.
I have seen it. I haven't played it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think they're doing really interesting things with drawing. Like what can you do with drawing games that isn't like guess this image or how well you can draw, things like that. So in Make the Difference, it is you're hiding the drawings that you make. It's like a spot the difference type game, but you're the one making the differences. So you're trying to hide them. And in
cool.
Maze Makers, yeah, it's super cool. In Maze Makers, it's a maze that you're running through, but the walls of the maze are made by the other players. So it just came out. It plays 2 to 6 players. It's designed by Fuji, and it's out by, at a Tokyo Game Market publisher named Boda Game Emu. And the premise is kind of like cartographers, if you're familiar with that, where you're passing your maze, like your player maze, to the player to your left. And then the player to your left is drawing walls, and then they're hiding a secret treasure of their own somewhere on the map that they don't want you to get. And then they pass the map, like telestrations or something, right? You're passing the map. And then so everyone does that. And then the player whose turn it is, so you all have a minute once you're done, drawing. Everyone has a minute. The players whose turn it is, they close their eyes. You tape down the map that you're about to run on. And then you flip it over and you get this kind of overlay, the small circle overlay that does kind of like a fog of war, maybe. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it. Mm-hmm. But essentially you have this marker that represents you, and then you have 1 minute and it says go, and you're just running through the maze. And the only restrictions really is you can't, like in real life, run through walls. So, or even touch walls, which I think is maybe different from real life. But if you touch walls, you lose a point. So it kind of restricts players just going wild. But it's such a fun tension. So I had so much fun. It's one of those games that, depending on the hour you play it, has different feeling. Like once you get past 10 p.m., 11 p.m., the game gets raucous. So it was so much fun. It was such a great play.
Yeah, I actually played Maze Makers also, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I think it was past the 10 p.m. mark, and I just did awfully.
Oh no!
Like I only hit 2 walls, but I think I made it to one of the treasures. And
Yes.
But I thought this game was like, it's so clever because like when you're writing your treasure, like everybody has to like write a different symbol. And I did like a D6 die, like somebody had a heart or something.
Yes.
And I love that. I love that how you're creating the maze for your opponents and everybody has some like influence on it.
Totally. And one of the cool things is if you put your treasure along with someone else who put their treasure like in the corner, right? You can combine walls and make it harder, like you're joint combining walls to make it harder. But then if the one person notices that, because you have your walls in your color marker, then they'll be like, oh, I'm going to follow that color. And they can be like, oh, there's 2 treasures back here. It's like choosing to go all or nothing.
Where you placed it. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And at 4 players, I think it was, you can have 2 treasures. So you can kind of like split your difference. The last thing, which is fun, is I didn't explain, but if you get back to the entrance within the time limit, it also counts as finding a treasure. So you're constantly thinking, should I stop and just retrace my steps? Because you have a marker path, right? So there's a fun tension too. When do I cut loose, or do I just keep digging for treasure? Yeah. It's great to have push your luck and drawing in a weird combo, right?
Super cool.
Yeah.
So that is Maze Makers.
Yes. Maze Makers.
So on my way home, I was flying back on the same flight with Joe Huber, And we had a layover. We both had a layover in Chicago. And so we broke out a couple card games. And one was one that I packed with me and I've been wanting to try for a while. And that is a game called Mindbug First Contact. This is a game that came out in 2022. It's designed by Scaf Elias, Marvin Hegan, Christian Kudal, and Richard Garfield. And it's published by Nerd Lab Games and Ghost Galaxy. So this is a 2-player card dueling game where you're summoning monsters that battle against each other. The deck of cards in the game is pretty big. Like, I don't know if there are 50 cards or something, but you're only going to use 20 cards each game. Like, each player is going to have a 10 card deck that they start the game with. So you'll have a lot of like variety of which kind of monsters you actually have in that you're playing with throughout the game. And your goal is to reduce your opponent's life to 0. So each player starts at 3 health, and you're trying to knock the other player down to 0 first to win the game. And it's really quick and fairly simple. On your turn, you'll have a hand of 5 cards, and you either play a card in front of you onto the table, or you fight with one of your monsters that's already on the table. You fight one of your opponent's monsters. And, you know, there's some keywords on these monsters and everything. Like, some of them are tough. Some can like attack twice. Some of them, you know, they have all these like little rules to them, but it's all like, it's very clean. There's a player aid, and there aren't so many abilities that you can't, you know, have them memorized after you play 2 games, which is really quick. And the hook of the game is that each player starts the game with 2 Mindbug cards, and there'll be 2 Mindbugs face up. And when, let's say I'm playing you, Taylor, if I play a creature and you have any remaining Mindbugs, you can take control of that creature and flip over one of your Mindbug cards. So, oh my goodness. Like, I mentioned I loved like Wizard's Cup at some point. And this game, like the mind games that you play, like as you're like thinking, like, should I play this card right now and tempt Taylor to Mindbug it and take it when I really have something better in my hand? And also, you only have 2 Mindbugs, and you could potentially be playing through 10 cards. When do you want to Mindbug one of your opponent's creatures? And it's such a like a little thing, but it's so cool what it does to your headspace as you're playing it. Have you played this one?
I have, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's one of those mechanics that instantly balances it in such a beautiful way. Like, the fact that it's almost like bidding and like trick taking. Don't bring it back to trick taking. Sorry.
I love it. No, bring it back. Bring it back.
But it's like, if this is an overpowered card, or if your opponent thinks it's an overpowered card, it's theirs, right? Like, there's just this inherent player-defined balance, which I just love in that game. Oh, it's such a great game.
It's so it's really neat, and it's so easy to like. I think it took like us 10 minutes to play, maybe 15 minutes to play, and you can just reshuffle all the cards, deal each other 10 more, and just play again.
Yeah, and with an opponent like Joe Hubert, who's very, 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 very smart person. Like,
and I beat him. I beat him.
I love that.
Yeah, Joe is so very sharp. Yeah.
Super sharp. Like, some of his favorite games like Sextet, which is like bridge with 6 people, and like he loves, you know, like the math of a lot of games. So that's awesome. That's
I got in his head.
You got in his head. Exactly.
Yeah, he told me about Sextet actually too.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
When we were driving to the airport, I was like, that sounds really cool.
Oh,
yeah.
This is a wild
check that out.
But like,
gotta check that out.
The Mindbug. What I love about Mindbug is like, also depending on whom you're playing, the game changes so much. Like you just said, like sometimes as a person, I will play my strongest first, and so that. But like you were saying, like some people are like, oh, I'll play something strong, but I have something stronger in my hand. Whereas I'm just like, I'm just going to go crazy, you know? And you can like learn that about someone and then use that knowledge in the next game because they're so quick. I love that about
Totally,
it.
but I could learn that about you, but then now I know that about you. So
Yes,
then you
yes.
might do the opposite, and I'm like, what is Taylor gonna do? But yeah, I love all those like mind twists in games, and yeah, and the other thing is like this game, the cards, like they're very funny. Like all of the monsters are kind of like just they have like fun name, fun art, and everything.
Yeah, it's like portmanteau. It's like always combining two animals, right? Or like two
Yes.
ideas or something. Yeah.
So cool. Yeah, it was something like that. But yeah, they were kind of entertaining to just like look through the cards too. That is Mindbug First Contact. What else you been getting into lately?
Love that. Yeah, I played recently actually at the retreat, which was great. It was a game called Lines of Action. So it came out in 1969. It is this abstract game. Yeah. I love discovering, especially with abstract games, just older kind of I don't know if it's hidden gems. I wasn't around in 1969, so I actually don't know how. But this wonderful game from 1969, designed by Claude Suchi, I believe, and it's published by a fair amount of people. Older games get published by a lot, but I think the edition I have is Abacus Spiel, and again, classic abstract game. It's 2 players, but essentially, the goal of the game is you're trying to combine your pieces. So the second that your pieces all touch diagonally or orthogonally, you have won. And the interesting kind of hook of the game is you can capture your opponent's pieces, but it makes it so there's fewer pieces for them so they can actually complete their goal easier, like in a wild kind of twist. Like in checkers or chess, like a capture is great. It's wonderful. They have less pieces, they have less opportunity and things like that.
But you're making it easier for them.
Yeah, it's so fun.
That's interesting.
And what's also nice is, so again, like checkers or chess, pieces move the same way. So like a knight will move like a knight for the whole game. Mm-hmm. But in Lines of Action, how you move is you count the number of pieces on a line, and then you move the number of spaces you move that many number of spaces. So like if there's 3
gotcha.
pieces in a line, your piece moves 3. And so you might be like, I'll move to a different line that only has 2 pieces, so I can move 2, which is exactly what I want. So it's fun to have kind of the same piece move differently in a game. And there's some dynamic moments that leads to. It's great. It's so much fun.
That's cool.
The beauty of it is also you can play it with checkers or chessboard. And I've had this thing where at the retreat, I've played it with someone named Lucas, who's amazing. We've managed to play it different way every time. Like every time we go to the retreat. Like the first time we played it outside in the snow with those giant chessboards that some people have. It's so much fun. Yeah. And then another time we played it just on a piece of paper because we just drew it up and you can just use whatever pieces. And then this time we were on it was like a pub crawl for ice cream. We were on a pub crawl for ice cream. So we're eating ice cream.
That's hardcore.
And we're playing. Yeah, it was hardcore. In Cincinnati in January.
In Cincinnati. Yeah. That is hardcore.
Yeah. That is hardcore. So we were playing on have you ever seen those like knitted kind of checker boards? We're playing on one of those on this table. So it was like had a different feel. Like it's just such a wonderful game that kind of translates to those different environments you played in. But yeah, that was one I played recently. I love that one.
Lines of Action. Cool. I'll have to check that out because I do love me some abstract strategy games.
Totally.
That sounds neat. So another game that I was going to mention, I think we played together at some point, if I'm not mistaken, but it's called Last Message. And this is a 2021 release designed by Lee Juhawa and Jeong Kim. And it's published by Yellow. Plays with 3 to 8 players. And in this game, Last Message, a crime was just committed. And so one player is going to be the criminal and another player is the victim, and all of the other players are the detectives. And the victim is basically trying to help the detectives figure out who the criminal is. And the way you're doing this is there are these different mats that are like, that have art that's like Where's Waldo style art, or like micro macro, like crazy stuff happening on these different boards that you can play with. And so the criminal is going to, so also the criminal and the victim are sitting behind this giant screen where like, I think at least one person walked up and was like, are you playing Captain Sonar? But like there's this giant screen so that the detectives can't see what's going on with the victim and the criminal. And on each side, the detectives have a slightly blown up version of the same board. But so the criminal is going to take this little glass bead and pick one of the characters in this crazy scene where there's so much happening. And they're going to say, okay, that's who I am. So the victim knows. Then the victim will have 1 minute. Is it 30 seconds or is it a minute? I don't know. It went by fast. It might be 30 seconds.
Yeah. It feels like fun. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a lot of time to draw some clues, and you can write words also on this dry erase board that's divided into, is it a 2 rows of 3, I think? I think it's 2 rows of 3.
Yeah, I think so.
It might be 2 rows of 3 or it might be a 3x3. But anyway, they're going to draw and write clues. It has to be a 3x3.
I think it's a 3x3.
Yeah. I think so.
I think.
It's some kind of grid, okay? They have a grid, and they're gonna draw. Confirmed. They're gonna draw some clues and to help the detectives figure out which character is the criminal. And after they do that, you might say, "Oh, no problem." And then, mind you, there are like so many different characters on this board. All of the different boards are very colorful and there's like so much going on.
Yeah.
But before the victim gets to, who cannot speak, by the way, the victim passes their dry erase sheet to the detectives, the criminal gets to erase a certain amount of boxes worth of info. So I think on the first round, the criminal gets to erase 5 boxes. And, it was just hilarious because 5 boxes on this little mat is a lot.
Yeah.
And then you just hand this to the detectives and you're just like, hopefully they get something from this. And you can get kind of clever. We all like learned as we played, but you can get kind of clever where you can spread stuff out in boxes and make sure that there's some helpful info, like even though it's going to get erased. And let's say like it often happens that the detectives can't get it from the first round. Then there's another round. And then the victim is going to draw on another sheet. Like there's a separate little dry erase board. And again, they have 30 seconds. And then the criminal only gets to erase 4 boxes this time. Mm-hmm. And so now they're getting more and more data. And, if the detectives can guess the correct character that the criminal is, then the detectives and the victim win. Otherwise, the criminal wins. And I had never heard of this game, and it was just a hoot every single time.
It was so good. And actually, did you get a chance to play both the sides, like the guesser and the clue giver?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. How did it feel being on the other side?
On the victim side, it felt awful the first round because I can't draw, and then like everything I did to try to be clever got erased, and like I feel like they just ended up with this curved line to guess from. But then I learned from that, and I did a little better the next time, and I ended up, for one round I played, I think, I guess this was the only round where I was the victim. It was the round where we were playing this board that has all these kind of like space little creatures, almost like from Futurama or something like that. And there was one that was wearing a helmet with a little antenna, and it had its hands like kind of almost touching the helmet. Yeah. And I was able to kind of draw that big, and I was hinting to them that it was somebody blue, and they were able to figure it out. And it was just like this satisfying thing when they figured it out. Yeah. Were you in my game with the cheese situation?
Okay. Yes. 100%. So I saw that picture with the hand on the head. What was so funny was it's like I think the first time I think you send something over, you'll send over like a word, but they'll erase the box that has the most important part of the word. So all they'll see is like the word back or like or front, and you're like, what does that mean, right? But yeah, that game we were in where someone tried to write crease, but they wrote in such a way that it looked like cheese. Yeah, they wrote kind of like, and so they didn't know this, but there was so much cheese on the board that we were just on this huge cheese run.
Yeah, we were like, it's got to be near this cheese.
Yeah, exactly. I've never seen a game that was so scrutinizing of handwriting in my life, and then like it was a speed game. So it's like not like the person had bad handwriting at all, but it's like you're writing so much, like, and so quickly that crease looks like cheese, and that will
crease looks like cheese, and and they didn't notice that cheese was all over the place.
All over the place. It has my favorite moments in Codenames. I think you said this, where like you give all these clues, this wonderful clue that clues in like 4 or 5. You're like, this is perfect, but like flying 5. And then you don't realize like the assassin is playing, or like the one you're not supposed to clue to.
And you're just like, oh, when they start talking about it, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear.
I noticed, like you said, like it seems almost the second round, the clue giver's like, oh, here we go. Like I noticed in the second round each time, people would draw the border around the clue mat.
Yeah.
And so when it got erased, you're like, oh, I think they're at least.
I see the edges.
Yeah, the edges to the board. Yeah. So I think,
It was fun. It was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. How do you think that one compares to, because there's like kind of like a one versus all, like, or like Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, like games like that have, I guess this one is interesting because it's one versus many, but everyone knows who everyone is. So there isn't really like a bluffing hidden element. It is more just like a Codenames kind of clue back and forth element. But how do you relate the drawing to the writing and like going back and forth on clues in that one?
Yeah, I haven't played Deception in a while. So I don't even remember exactly how that one all goes down. But I think this one, like a lot of people didn't want to be on the drawing side. Yeah. And I just kind of, do something that scares you, or that just kind of get out of your comfort zone a little bit. So I was like, okay, like I'll do it. I'm terrible at drawing, but I really found it fun to be on both sides of this one. Yeah. I remember at one point when I'm on the detective side and I'm looking and I saw this one creature and I said, or this like one little character, I was like, you'd have to be mad to pick this person. And then we just kind of like moved on. But that was actually the answer that which we discovered a little bit longer. And it's just like, it's really fun to like be on both sides of this kind of game. Like when you're the one sitting there watching the people do the analysis from these terrible drawings that are partially erased, it's just so funny to hear, what they're saying. And then, it's just, I think it's a fun game to be on like both sides. Yes. And I like that I feel like there were at least like 5 different boards.
Yeah. And all wildly different. Like that one that kind of was like the Hobbit-ish Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. With the cheese. Yeah.
Cheese. Yeah. The cheese board, essentially. That's what it becomes now.
Yeah. Good times. Good times. So that is Last Message. And now a word from our sponsor. Get ready to unleash unlimited possibilities. Pre-orders are now open for Star Wars Unlimited, the newest trading card game from Fantasy Flight Games. Featuring iconic heroes, villains, and starships from throughout the legendary Star Wars galaxy, Star Wars Unlimited is a fast-paced, easy-to-learn game that anyone can enjoy. Choose your leader from a list of fan-favorite characters. Each game of Star Wars Unlimited has you and your opponent alternating back and forth, performing one action at a time. Battles are quick yet strategically deep, and the first player to destroy their opponent's base wins the game. Connect, collect, and compete with organized play, which was baked into this game's DNA from the very beginning. No matter how you play, Star Wars Unlimited has something for everyone. If you'd like to learn more, check out www.starwarsunlimited.com. Look forward to the game's official launch on March 8th. So Taylor, I'm excited to start talking about like the games we played last weekend because I know we had some overlap, but I'm sure we also didn't.
Yeah.
And so I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear what games you caught your attention and everything that you enjoyed. But I do want to talk a little bit about complexity and trick-taking style games. And I keep saying trick-taking style games because I just want to, I'm going to say trick-taking games going forward, but this could mean climbers, shedders, and anything in between, really.
Yeah. There seems to be kind of like a catch-all type thing. Like even like popular games in Russia, like Duroc, like they're not trick-taking or climber shedding, but like the same people like them. You know, like it uses the same thought process, or like it feels the same. You know, it feels super similar. So I'm with you. I love a catch-all term like that.
Yeah, exactly. And again, like to take it back to like a music reference, you know, the minute you have a song that has an odd time signature, you know, not just the 4/4, or even better for some, multiple odd times, you know, or multiple different time signatures, you know, you lose a lot of people, and that's totally understandable. That's not everybody's jam. Personally, I get excited by that. So I think I'm somebody who leans towards enjoying like heavier trick-taking games. Yeah. But I also like light things that are just easy to bust out at the end of the night or with family, or people who don't play a lot of games in general. But like, I was just trying to think about it. Like, what makes these games kind of feel more complex than others?
Right. Totally. Because one of the revelations I had when I was starting to get into this genre a lot is like Uno is a shedding game. You know, like often players play that more. And so it's interesting to talk about climbing shedding games like Haggis or Tichu or something, and then be like, oh, well, it's a similar goal to a childhood game that you play a lot, you know, and that there's like these levels of complexity and like what gets added to it. I found that bidding is a big part. I think guessing what's going to happen in a game is tough. I remember having a friend talk to me about Dune, the not the deck building one by Renegade and Direwolf, but like the original or like one of the earlier ones, where like the Bene Gesserit gets to like win if they predict.
Like the OG Dune board game from like the 70s or something. Yeah.
Yes. They predict which turn and which faction's going to win, and if that happens, they win actually.
Yeah.
And it's always leads to those wild moments, you know. But like predicting what's going to happen in a game, it necessitates like you knowing the game state, you understanding what can happen in the genre or kind of the flow, and then also evaluating this random thing that you just got dealt. So I think bidding is a sign of complexity for sure. I think exceptions and stuff, like if people have played Skull King, which is one of the more popular trick-taking games, that has a trump hierarchy where if Skull King is winning, it can lose to like, I don't remember. It's like the mermaid and the mermaid.
Right. Kraken or something.
Yeah, the Kraken. And yes, exactly. So I think when I think of complexity, I think of a mix of rules and exceptions, and then also depth of choice, and then also like what it's asking of the players, like bidding and being able to understand your hand, and like in Hearts, like what do you pass, right? Or when do you shoot the moon? Like knowing what can happen and like how long it takes to know what can happen is a big thing of what I expect for like the depth or like the heaviness of a trick-taking game.
Yeah. And I know like there are some, I usually, when I bring up like, hey, have you played a trick-taking game? I ask if you played something like, you know, if somebody's like, I don't know what that is, I usually say, have you played anything like Hearts or Spades, I guess?
Yeah.
And like, I actually have not played either of those games since I was like a kid, but you know, but at least it's a starting place for them.
Yeah.
And playing some of the games that I've been playing in the past year, I find that some of them add a lot of really cool twists to just following the lead suit, you know? And I think the more twist you have, like the more complex it kind of gets.
100%.
And like you said, the bidding, like, you know, it's one thing even to say just bid on how many tricks you think you're going to win. But there are other games where the bidding gets a little wilder, which one of the games I'm going to bring up in a bit has like really interesting bidding, but it's definitely adds a little bit of complexity to how the game feels to play and to teach to people and everything.
100%. It comes to the point where so there's this designer that I love, Sean Ross, who did Haggis and and Bacon and stuff. And he has a wonderful knowledge of older classic trick-taking games, like from, very early on Switzerland or France or a lot of like Chinese climbing games, which are really fascinating. But those have kind of tables of bidding where you can choose, you look at your hand, you're like, is this a better avoidance hand? Is this a better trick-taking hand? Is this a better hand? Like there's one that has like 68 different ways you can play the game. And like you choose one of those 68 depending on your hand. And then you play that game. It's wild.
Wow.
Like ones where like cards are high, then low, like every trick, like going back and forth. Or like you want to win only a certain suit or like things like that. Or he was showing me ones where there's a climbing shitting game. I think it's called, Bao. I don't want to mispronounce Bao Huang, where essentially players, you play with 100 and I don't mean to laugh, but it's wild. You play with 168 card deck and you deal players 35 cards per hand. So you have a hand of cards that
you can't even hold.
Yeah. So what they do is they stack it vertically and horizontally. So your hand looks like a cityscape.
Whoa. Wow.
There's towers and like little side, like there's so many cards in your hand. And then you get a bunch of jokers. And there's actually like a recent group of designs using dominoes where every card, kind of like Scout, if people are familiar with Scout, where cards have numbers on the top or bottom. But you play climbing shedding with dominoes where, I can make a run with this, or if I flip the domino, I can make like a suit with this. So like giving the players a ton of options is also depth of complexity that I've seen a lot. Like there's a game called Fittich that has wild dominoes too. So it's like, this domino could be whatever I want it to be, in addition to like the 28 dominoes I have in my hands. So you have like 30 dominoes. It's crazy. Yeah.
I was actually just thinking too, there might be some people out there listening right now that don't know what we're talking about when we're saying a trick taking or climbing, shedding. I just thought of it myself. Like we just went deep. We're coming off this weekend of playing all these games, but I'll let you take it and just kind of just briefly describe the different styles.
Sure. Yeah. I'm guilty of this a lot. So on my channel, I just jump into it and I use phrases and I definitely feel bad. Like the hammer, like, I'm the last in play. You're the hammer. And I just say the hammer. I never explain it.
Yeah.
But
somebody said kitty to me this past weekend and I was like, what?
Yes. What's amazing. So I've been engrossed in this for years now. And I just hadn't played bridge a lot, but there's a term in bridge, I guess. And it came up in Extreme Tricks, which you might have seen, but roughing. Do you see roughing?
Yeah.
So I was like, what's roughing? And people are like, you don't know what roughing is? I was like, no. So like I'm learning new phrases.
That's cool.
So trick taking, generally, it's a type of game where everyone plays a card and then someone takes those cards, like they win the trick, everyone playing a card to the trick. And then the person leads to the next trick. So they play a card into the next trick. It's interesting. I've watched a lot of different videos on how to teach this, and it's a lot of people have different approaches, but you're kind of just playing cards with different rules, similar to Go Fish or Old Maid or something. But a trick taking game is essentially people usually play a card into a trick, someone wins it, and then you keep going until people are out of cards. And there's often must follow because cards have suits. So if someone has like a heart, and if someone leads a heart and you have a heart in your hand, you have to play it. Obviously, the games we're going to be talking about
break all the rules.
They break all the rules. That's always the fun of it. But that's generally what a trick taking game is, and then you'll get points depending on what you take, what cards you take, or maybe how many cards you took, how many tricks you took. Climbing shedding is similar to like what we talked about. Uno is you're just trying to get rid of your cards, and then climbing means you have to play a stronger set. So you're looking at your hand of cards and you're like, if someone plays a 2, I can play a 3 or higher. I can't play that 1 anymore. A lot of them are, just like trick taking games, very different. But a climbing shedding game also has types of things you can play. So you can play like similar to like Texas Hold'em or poker, where you have like different combinations.
Combos,
Combos, like a straight or like a run or like two of the same numbers, like a pair or like triples. And again, so many. It's hard to like compared to like deck building, right? Where you're like, okay, you're building a deck, and like you're adding cards to the deck, and that's like the core conceit of a deck building game. And obviously, that has like a ton of things that can go off it. Trick taking is tough because often when I'm like, here's what a trick taking game is, I have to be like, well, I'm about to teach you a game that breaks everything I'm about to that I just told you.
That I just told you, yeah.
Yeah. But that's generally what they are, I guess.
What would you say is a good, like, one of your favorite, like, lighter trick-taking games that is available, mostly available for people who are, like, maybe into lighter trick-taking games?
That's a wonderful thing. I look for games that don't have bidding. I think, again, it's helpful if you know the state of the game. And I've kind of gone back and forth with some friends who are like, like trust the players, just throw them into something and they'll learn it. And I definitely agree that can happen, but as easy of a process as possible is probably my goal. I think the most simple trick-taking game is Whist, where we played. Were you in the military? Whist?
I wasn't in it. I missed it. I was too busy upstairs playing Keyforge, I think.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I totally missed military Whist. So it was like 28 players or something like that.
Yes. I probably should have chatted about it actually as one of my picks, but essentially it was a 28-player game of Whist. But Whist is probably the most basic for getting the flow of the game. I like a game called Boast or Nothing for teaching intro, because it teaches a little bit of, you want to win tricks, sometimes you want to avoid tricks, and then also the concept, which I didn't actually talk about, but there's a concept of a trump suit where one suit might be stronger than the other, and that teaches that really well.
Yeah,
I think intro games of hearts are fun, personally, because that's how I learned the genre. But it's tough to teach a trick avoidance game as your first trick taking game.
Oh yeah,
because I was teaching someone hearts, and they're like, "I'm just winning a lot. Is that what you're supposed to do?" I'm like, "Oh, not really." I'm taking a lot of tricks. Yeah.
And then Rebel Princess, just to chime in on your hearts, like Rebel Princess is a new game that I've talked about, that I picked up at Essen in 2023, and that is what people, because again, I haven't played a hearts in forever, but everybody's like, oh yeah, it's just hearts with a lot of wacky rules.
Yes.
It's like, I think about that one too, because I'm like, can I throw this one at my mom?
Right.
And maybe, I think, like, my mom has done Cat in the Box and Delt / Crass Caryard.
Oh,
and
man.
I'm throwing them at her.
Mom knows.
And Scout, and Yokai Septet too.
Damn.
Yeah.
Your mom knows. Your mom's in it. No, those are wonderful. I think personally, like, I'm such a fan of co-op games, because players can kind of help learn the rules together, and there's no, how like sometimes in competitive games people are like, oh, I can give you advice, and someone's like, oh, is that advice that you're going to use, or like, are you giving me advice to do something that would win? And it's like kind of cheeky and like, but the crew is a wonderful intro to trick taking games, especially because the first few are very short, which is lovely in a learning game where you're going to make a fair amount of mistakes. So it's nice to kind of pull back. Especially, it also teaches you the importance of being short suited, when to play trump, when to lead what. So the crew is maybe my number one pick.
For that kind of like lighter, and the fact that it's cooperative, like you're saying, that's a really good point. And that's like, I love the crew also.
Yeah, it does a great job of bringing players in. I think there's a reason why it's 68 on the top board game. I forget what it's called, like the
ranking.
Ranking, yes.
Yeah,
it's super high up there.
That's cool. Yeah, I know some of the games we're going to talk about are probably leaning on the heavier side. But one thing maybe will be a little personal goal for me is, like, I've never played bridge. So I might need to try bridge so that I have more familiarity when I go to trick taking events and someone's like, oh, like bridge.
Yes. I think so too. I would know what roughing was, so I wouldn't look like a doofus in front of all these other trick taking fans.
Cool. Well, Taylor, let's jump into. I guess we each picked 5 games that we'll talk about that we enjoyed last weekend. And apologies in advance because some of these games, probably most of them, are going to be a little hard to find. I'm gonna have to look at maybe tricky imports, Tanuki games.
Yeah.
Just shout out on BGG if you love it, and maybe somebody will pick it up and make it easier to get if it sounds cool.
I hope this is becoming the pipeline. I think there's a sign of people definitely being interested in these games and then publishers paying attention to that. I think there's more and more publishers going to Tokyo Game Market and seeing what's popular, seeing the hits from there, and realizing that these wonderful games that are currently very tough to get, or sometimes tough to get, and making them more readily available. So I think there is a growing amount of availability for these. So even like our conversation right now is hopefully helping to highlight these, bring these to different markets or bring them to the States and trying to get them played because they're great.
Yeah, and I'll add some subliminal messages too for the different publishers out there.
Yes. Do something like pick up these games in reverse or something like. There's that thing where like certain people can't hear certain frequencies, and so maybe publishers can hear. Yeah, put that message in there.
I'll put it on the publisher frequency.
The publisher frequency. Exactly.
Okay. What's the first game you want to talk about?
Yes. So this one. It's actually a wonderful segue. It's called the Kakapo Buddy and Party. So this was at Tokyo Game Market. They had a wonderful booth. It's so much fun. One of my favorite things is I will go to a booth, grab one of their games, and meet them. They're so nice, and they have, sometimes fun costumes or art or like a setup at the booth. And then I'll be like, "What is this game going to be like?" And then I'll finally get it played, and I'll be like, "Oh, it's so nice to relive that and be like, wow, these wonderful people made this wonderful game." But so this game is designed by Chatra Games, I believe. There's something to where sometimes, like in Japan or definitely Tokyo Game Market, there will be like circles is kind of what they call them, where different designers will be a part of like a group. I'm trying to think of like similar situations, maybe like Prospero Hall or something, like some.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking of when you were describing this, but I couldn't think of their name. But like a group of design, like a collective of designers or something. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
gotcha.
So this came out 2023, and it's 2 to 4 players. Its complexity, I'd say, it's a really interesting one, especially segueing off of what we just talked about, is because it's essentially the crew, but with a little bit more onto it. So I know a lot of people talk about next step games, or like, oh, I showed some people this intro, like what's next. And this feels definitely like the crew. It has missions. You go on missions that get harder and harder and harder, and it's cooperative, but it adds on this level of spatial puzzling. So the theme is you are trying to take photographs of birds, which is a lovely theme. How you do that is these birds are these polyomino shapes, and the cards you play are are other polyomino shapes that you're going to try to surround the birds. So, for example, maybe like the 8 in a suit is bigger than the 1 in the suit. So, or that's usually true. But so the card that wins the trick, it's going to have a shape on it. You're going to grab that shape and you're going to put it on the board. And so you're just trying to surround these birds.
Whoa, that's cool.
It's a fun theme also because they say the reason you can't talk about your hand or you can't communicate, is because you don't want to scare away the birds, which is a cute little.
That's perfect. I love it.
Yeah, I love that.
That's so cool.
And it does a great job. It has an interesting thing also. I mean, speaking of complexity, I know we've talked about different ways trick-taking games are complex, but I think knowing how a hand is going to go, like the flow of a hand, is definitely a part of complexity as well. So in this game, how the trump system works is the trump suit is the suit of the card that won the last trick. So it changes per trick.
Oh.
So let's say like just knowing that, you're like, oh, interesting. I don't know how that's going to work. But in practice, you realize that let's say you won the last trick, you have the same suit left in your hand, you're going to win probably the next 2 tricks because like the third to last trick might be purple is now trump and you only have purple left. it's going to stay purple. So it's interesting that you might be like, oh, we want a smaller shape. Maybe I'm going to hold a smaller card. Hopefully it becomes Trump. Win it with Trump, and then we have a smaller space, which is more useful kind of for like, classic polyomino games where sometimes you want that 1x1, like patchwork.
Yeah,
right?
that little square. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's fun. It's like kind of next level because not only does it have a different trick-taking flow that I've seen ever in a trick-taking game, but also there's spatial kind of reasoning to it. It also has this wonderful moment where, so again, you're trying to surround these birds, right? And you can't tell the person who won the trick how to place the polyomino. So players are all just like watching quietly as you're choosing where to go. It's like cooperative Isle of Cats where you're like, oh, how are you gonna build that?
Well, that's so funny that you say cooperative Isle of Cats, because Race to the Raft, which is in the Isle of Cats universe, has like a moment like in the game where you have to place these polyomino fire tiles and you cannot get any input from other players. So I knew exactly when you were saying that moment of like kind of cringing when you're hoping they place it one place and they're like, that's so awesome.
That's the exact feeling. In fact, I didn't know Race to the Raft was co-op, and I love that. I really want to check that out because it is that similar feeling.
It's cool. Yeah.
Oh, that's so amazing. Yeah, that was one, and it's also one. It's kind of like Pringles. Like it's one of those ones that you want to just play. Like, oh, let's play the next
Pop
one.
And you can't stop.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
And how do you pronounce it again?
I believe it's the Kakapo Buddy and Party.
The Kakapo Buddy and Party.
Which is
all right. That sounds really, really fun.
Yeah,
I had not even heard about that one.
Yeah, it's so much fun. It's a great one.
So the first game I'm going to mention is the game that I'm going to talk about that I guess I know the least about and recall the least about, but I thought it was really interesting.
I love that.
And it doesn't even have, at the time of this recording at least, a BGG page yet. It's called Makai Fuda. And I think it just came out at Tokyo Game Market in December 2023.
Yeah.
Maybe sometime in 2023. Look, I don't know. We're flying here. I'm guessing. I would say the complexity on this one is maybe a medium-ish, maybe medium plus. And some of these games, like especially like any kind of like the Japanese games or the foreign games from other countries, there's sometimes a complexity that just comes from if you're having to translate rules, or if if the cards aren't pasted up with English and you're trying to, so that like this one has this 8-bit art that looks like an old like Nintendo game or something. And the first like kind of barrier for me was just like understanding the card, the graphic design and everything is a little like different and was a little challenging for me. But you're going to have these different monster suited cards, and each monster, there were 4 different types of monsters. They kind of have a relative rank to each other, and they have a different amount of cards and different ranked cards in them. Okay, this is definitely medium as I'm talking about it. It is there's some complexity here. But after you get your hand of cards, you're going to secretly bid on which monster you think is going to win the most tricks. So if I bid on, say, there's a green monster, which I was calling the Snap Peas guy. If I bid a Snap Peas card from my hand, I'm taking that card out of my hand, putting it face down. I'm hoping that monster is going to win the most tricks. But now here I am losing a card from my hand that might help influence that. So it's always kind of a tough call when you're deciding which card to bid on or which monster you're going to bid on. And also, you don't know what your opponents are doing, which I really loved about this game. The bidding was hard. Yeah. But I really liked it because it made for kind of an exciting little reveal at the end of the hand when it's like, oh, which monster did everybody bid on? So each monster has a card that is on the table that everyone can see, and it's worth a certain amount of points depending on the number of players that successfully bid on that monster. So for example, if, let's say, I was the only one who bid on the green monster and I won, I would get 60 points. Or I don't remember if it was coins or points. We'll just call them points for now. But Taylor, if you and I both bid green and green was the monster that won the most tricks, then we would each get 50 points instead. And then if 3 or 4 people bid on green and green won, we would each get 40. So you get the most if you're the only one bidding on that particular monster. And the scoring is varied between all 4 types of monsters and also for the different player counts for each monster.
Wow.
And you're going to, every time you play a trick, let's say green monster wins the trick, you're going to track how many tricks they're winning that monster with a little die that you'll put on their card. Mm-hmm. And then let's say everything worked out in my favor at the end of the round, green did win. Then all of the other monsters are going to get a little token added to them. So now if they win next round, they're worth more points. It's like 10 more points, I think, each time it kind of gets boosted. So that's kind of neat that the point value is fluctuating for monsters as you play the game. Then you also have these like magic cards okay, this is a complex one. Then you also have these magic cards where if somebody like leads with one type of monster and then you can play a magic card, it boosts the one of the monsters or something like that. Again, I apologize. I don't remember exactly how this game worked, but I thought it was just really cool. I love the idea of everybody secretly bidding on one of these monsters based on the cards they have in their hand. And you have to bid with a card in your hand. And that, just watching how people play and trying to see like, I was trying to be like sneaky about who I was bidding on. But then I'm like, there's so much kind of going on that I don't know if it mattered or if I should have been more obvious. But right. I think the more obvious you are, then people are going to try to make sure that that monster doesn't win.
Right.
So, so I like games like that where everybody kind of has like influence on things that are happening. Like there's a game called A War of Whispers and like The King is Dead, where we're all manipulating these cubes on the board and we're all trying to win, and like not one person controls one monster or anything like that. So you didn't get a chance to play this one, did you?
No, sadly not. I know exactly what you mean by the graphic design because it stood out amongst all the tables. You'd walk around and be like, oh, there's colors and numbers, like that's a trick table. Yeah. But then you see this one, you're like, oh,
whoa, that's something different.
Yeah, and also the little dice and like it. Just,
it has a different look to it.
Table presence was wild on this one. Did it feel like a game where once you played like a bunch, that those subtleties of where I'm going to go and bluffing maybe a little bit would come out?
No, because to tell you the truth, it took me a few rounds to still, and I still can't remember because there was an element of poison in the game too. So like some of these extra things I didn't 100% grasp.
Yeah.
Even after a full game, or at least I don't remember like right now enough that like it stuck with me. Yeah. But I still thought it was really cool.
Oh, that's
like,
awesome.
And I think, it's also like, we were playing it from translated rules, and there was not like someone who was super familiar with the game. Like we were all kind of like, figuring it out. So that adds some complexity to the learning experience and understanding and everything. But I know some people played it multiple times and, were like, it was the people who played it seemed to like it.
Yeah. Who kept digging.
Yeah.
There is something. And like I know you preface the list of all these at this retreat where they're hard to get. There is that huge element of often you're translating the rules before you play. You're reading the rules. There's a thing where classic board game night. Some players might bring a game and be like, "Hey, I really want to play this," and they're like, "Oh, do you know how to play? Can you teach?" And they're like, "Not really. We might have to read the rules." Like that
right.
It's like that, but cranked to 11, right? Like you have to translate the rules into English, guess what they mean, and then be like, let's learn how to play, like that type of stuff.
And they're again often these slightly more complex trick-taking games on top of that. So it all kind of boosts it up. But that is Makai Fuda.
Nice. It looked great. I really wanted to try it. My next game was Loop. And
I didn't get a chance to play it, but I kept hearing people talk about it.
I kind of try to have, ear to the ground, I think is the phrase. I tried I tried to pay attention to what games were being played, and this was probably top 5. I think this was getting played a lot.
Yeah.
It again, I feel like this is a broken record, or we're on a loop, huh? This just came out. Tokyo Game Market just came out in 2023. It's designed by Takashi Saito, and the publisher is Brain Games. And this is a climbing shedding game. And it's interesting to quantify it as like what level of complexity. So in this game, the hook is it's a climbing shedding game where players are trying to go out, classic. But what happens is kind of like Turn the Tide. You don't pass your hand around. You don't reshuffle and redeal. Every time you play a card, it actually goes back to kind of where you played it. And the hands stay where they're at. And then what happens is the player who did the least best, who player didn't do great, they are going to pick which seat they want. So the player who got, 4th or who didn't go out, they're going to be like, you know what? I want that first hand again. And they're going to try to see if they can go out first again. So it's a really interesting game. And in terms of complexity, I would say it's like a little bit complex, but it's one of the beautiful games where it goes with the players, if that makes sense. Like if you're playing this for the first time and you're kind of exploring it, like it's not too bad. It's like a light to medium, but the subtleties of how can I play this hand differently than the last player who played it is very interesting. So often the players who had the first and second hands will get put onto like the third and fourth hands, because you can't pick your hand again.
Are you physically getting up?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. I'm sitting here wondering, trying to like picture this game.
Totally. It plays at 3 players, so you can technically, like, thanks to math, like choose a direction and pass, because that's kind of how that can work.
Okay.
But at 4 players, the 4th player person stands up, picks a seat, sits down. That person, everyone stands up.
Wow. That's different.
Super different. And the person or the hand that starts the game is the same each time. So everything's like the exact same. And this is part of an interesting, like tying it back to complexity. A lot of players who are really into trick-taking games will want to play duplicate versions of that game. Like, have you heard of duplicate bridge?
No.
It's a bridge type where everyone in the tournament has the same hands. So if you won, it's like, like the game setup is random, but everyone's playing the same random setup. So you don't feel like, I just got a bad hand, right? It's similar to some people might have heard about duplicate Pandemic, like how they do Pandemic tournaments. So in Pandemic tournaments, they have the same, what's that called? That
deck of bad cards?
Deck of bad cards is what it is, yeah. The deck of bad cards. And so you can, and everyone plays the same characters. So it's like the player choices are the only thing that's different. And even though that deck of bad cards is random, everyone has that same random setup. So like Jaipur is always the first city, or like San Francisco, or like things like that. And it's more about how you handle that compared to the other people. So
that's neat. That's really neat. I didn't realize that either, that there were like tournaments that were done that way.
Yeah, yeah. People try to play duplicate Tichu. So it's like, even though you get dealt, you don't get like the great cards, you can try again, and you swap hands. So this game kind of simulates that. You know how like Challengers, that game that came out, simulates the idea of like a tournament in a game,
right?
Which is really, really cool. This kind of tries to simulate duplicate games in a game. So what's really fun about the game is you can be like, that hand over there that's just lost and lost and lost and lost and lost. Everyone can be like, that's just a bad hand. And then someone gets it and they get first. And you're like,
and crushes it with it. Yeah.
yeah. It's really, really fun. And there's moments. Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry. There's moments to make the game different. So certain cards can be used either as ways to stop things immediately and take control and win again, kind of like a bomb, maybe. And a bomb and climbing shedding is a way to like say, we're going to stop what we're doing and I'm going to take control. Or you could use it to make it so instead of 15s being strong, 1s are now strong. So you can kind of reverse the order thanks to the ranking. So that's, I think, how you get moments to where that hand that was so bad is actually good now, is because play can happen pretty differently between hand to hand, even though everyone knows where everything is by the time you're playing like the third hand.
Wow, that's really neat. I was going to ask too, how is the climbing? Like, what kind of combos do you play in this?
Yeah, great question. It's actually surprisingly pretty simple. There's only 3 suits, and you can play only singles, so just 1 card, sets, so you can play pairs or triples, 2 of a kind, 3 of a kind, and then runs, but they have to be suited. So you can do like 4, 5, 10, but they all have to have the same suit. So they're a little bit more rare, which is nice. Super clean. Yeah, it's kind of my favorite version of climbing shedding, is where you don't have too many crazy melds. I guess speaking to complexity though, that's part of it too, is like some climbing shedders could be more complex because they have so many different melds you can play.
Right.
And you're looking at this one hand, and kind of like, Glory to Rome or maybe Innovation, you have so many ways you can play a card.
Right.
And you're like,
when you have so many combos that you can do, it's like evaluating your hand is hard.
Yes, totally,
hard.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's cool. Yeah, this Loop is one of the games that I kind of regretted that I didn't get a chance to play. So I'll have to track down a copy.
Track down a copy is the classic. I think it might be picked up as well. So I think if you're listening to this podcast a year from now, maybe all this will be
in the future.
Yeah.
Awesome. Loop. Love it. So the next game I'm going to talk about, I know you know because you have an awesome video on it. It's a game called Trick Raiders. So I went into last weekend with the goal of, hey, I have a lot of trick-taking games that I haven't played, that I heard good things about. And so I wanted to try to play some of them. And Trick Raiders is one that I got sometime last year, I believe. I can't remember if I bought it through Tanuki or Tricky Imports but I got a copy of Trick Raiders and it's been sitting on my shelf. And I finally got a chance to play it. This is a 2022 release designed by a designer who goes by N2, Yoshihisa Nakatsu, and it's published by Southern Cross Games. Plays with 3 to 4 players, and this is a must-follow trick-taking game. So if I lead with a king, or a king, if I lead with diamonds, everybody has to play diamonds if they have it. Oh my gosh, can you imagine that? If it's like follow rank, there's probably something out there that's like that. But this is a must follow trick taking game with a fixed trump suit. And when you get dealt your cards, some of the cards are going to be dealt face up in front of you on the table in a card row. And then the other ones are going to be in your hand like normal. So you have this mix of public and private cards. And before you start actually playing the round, you're pretty much going to kind of set your bid with these cards. So the cards that are on the table are the only cards during the round that you are going to be able to lead a trick with. And the ones in your hand, you can only follow with. At any point while you're playing the round, let's say I start the round with 3 cards on the table that I'm saying I'm going to lead exactly 3 times. And let's say I lead 3 times, I'm on a roll, but then I win a trick and I need to lead a 4th time and I have no cards on the table to lead with. Ouch. I got raided. I lose a life. So in this game, you'll have a certain amount of like life points. I don't remember if it was like 2 or 3. And so I would lose a life if at any point I can't lead because I don't have any more cards on the table, or if I can't follow because I don't have any more cards in my hand. So you have this really interesting bidding system where you're like bidding on how many tricks you think you can lead and follow. And the game is going to end when one player loses their last life and they're eliminated, and the player with the most lives left wins. And I think there are like some special cards, maybe?
Yeah. There's one that will change trump. And then there's one that is worth a point if you capture it, or win with it, rather.
Okay.
And then there's one that actually like makes someone take one of their I think I'm going to lead with this card. It's like into their hand.
Right. Yeah. And so like this one, I had heard good things about it and I was not disappointed. I really, really liked it. And I'm so excited to actually play my own copy and introduce it to some of my friends who love trick-taking games. I would say like complexity-wise, it's probably medium. Maybe on the lighter side of medium. Just thinking about games like Cat in the Box. Like I feel like it could be comparable maybe to the weight of something like that. Especially, you know, if this game has English rules. Thankfully, there's a really great YouTube video on Taylor's trick-taking table that you can really get a really good feel for how this game works and like see if it's something you might enjoy. But I thought it was like so neat that you're getting this split hand of cards on the table and in your hand, and then you're deciding, hey, do I think because of the cards that I have that I'm going to get to lead, like I'm going to be winning a lot, so that means I'm going to be leading a lot, so maybe I want to add some cards to the table, but then that's reducing the amount that you're going to be able to follow with. Yes. Yeah, it's so cool.
You're describing the feeling exactly. There's something, it's funny because it's essentially bidding, you know, how many tricks you think you're going to win. Because that, you know, how many tricks you win leads to how many times you're going to lead, things like that. And the fact that you have to show what you're going to lead lets players kind of guess what's going to happen in the game in kind of like an interesting way. Yeah. There's I love unique open information in a game about hidden information. Like that's trick-taking games, right? What does that person have? And then it's like, well, what if I show you a little bit of what I have? Like, what can we do off that? Such a fun game.
Yeah, it like that element of the public and private kind of reminded me of No Coast Dice, which I know more people have gotten their hands on and really, really enjoy that game too. But yeah, I really do like that mix of private and public cards. And so I don't know if you know this, but if you play Les Plateaux with 2 players, their 2-player variant has a public private card thing, which I thought worked pretty well.
I didn't know that. That's so wonderful.
Yeah. I actually enjoyed it at 2 players, so that was kind of a nice little surprise.
That's awesome. How often did players, or did you try to go 0 or 6 in Trick Raiders? Meaning, I don't think I'm going to win, or I think I'm going to win a ton.
I don't think many people went that extreme that often. And I know I certainly played a little more conservatively just because I'm like, I don't want to lose my life, you know?
Yes, exactly.
But I think I would play around with that more when I play it in the future.
Yeah.
And push a bit. But yeah, anytime I'm kind of learning a game for the first time, I usually try to keep it a little mellow.
Yeah. No,
sometimes. Sometimes I like to go extreme though.
Yes. Oh, wink, wink.
But yeah. So that is Trick Raiders. And I also played Trick Runaway, which yeah, I don't know if you played that one, but it's like kind of a follow-up to this, like maybe same designer, but it's like you're running out of a dungeon sort of.
Yeah.
I liked it, but that was again another one where, you know, we were kind of like learning from translated rules.
Yeah. And
I think it's one I need to play again, but like Trick Raiders was more of a slam dunk banger for me. So I'm definitely looking forward to playing that one more.
Yeah, I would definitely see that as well. I played Trick Runaway with someone who they had played Trick Raiders at a wedding. Like for some reason, I don't know how I get to a wedding, but I love that. But they played it at a wedding.
I want to go to that wedding.
Yeah, where's that wedding? Yeah. They played at a wedding like 50 times or something. Like it was this game that just translates to like players playing in different ways and going crazy and having so much fun with it. But they were like, "Ooh, I don't know if I could teach." I think it was like maybe a little bit too many rules, like a little bit.
Yeah, the trick runner or trick runaway, like it had some things where you were modifying the value of all your cards playing. So at some point, like I had like a -2 card in front of me because something happened, and then so every card I played was -2. But then there was some other stat you were like kind of capturing. So I would say, yeah, it's definitely a little more complex. and like fiddly, and I don't know. I want to play it again. I want to play it again. Like it wasn't something like I was like, ew.
Right. Totally. And one of the wonderful parts about this retreat is like after you leave, you'll have so many more. Like you have these games that you're like, I don't know how to teach, or like I haven't played, or like it's hard to play with other friends. And then now it's like, okay, now I can like play Trick Raiders and with my friends.
Yeah. That is very exciting to me because it's this like really tiny box too, but I've been afraid of it.
Yes,
I've been afraid to tap. Even with your helpful video, I'm like, I'm not ready to show this to people. You know,
totally.
Now I am. I am.
The confidence and the tool. Yes, I love that.
So that is Trick Raiders.
Nice. So I played a game that, again, this was played a lot. I think. Did you get a chance to play? It's called Baronda.
Yes.
Oh,
I did get a chance to play Baronda, and I liked it a lot too. That was one of the games, like you were saying, Loop, everybody was talking about.
Yes.
Baronda was another game that I would ask people, like, oh, what's your favorite thing you've been playing? And so many people kept saying Baronda, and I was like, I gotta play it.
Yes,
so
right?
Yeah.
So Baronda is a trick-taking game that, again, came out recently at Tokyo Game Market, and it's designed by Toshiki Arao, and it's published by A-Team. So it is interesting. I'd say it is more medium than the light to medium, but kind of like a light to medium complexity. And I say that because kind of the hook of it is you are bidding on how many tricks you think you're going to take, which is very classic, traditional trick-taking kind of flow. But what puts this on kind of this like a tightrope of sorts is that if players bid too much, the game turns into an avoidance game where you don't want tricks. And then if players bid too few, it becomes a trick-taking game where you want as many tricks as you want. So it plays off of what players think is going to happen in a really fun way. So if players are a little greedy, now it's like, oh, you actually don't want tricks at all.
And it's collective. It's collective, yes. Like the sum of everybody's bid.
That is a huge point. Oh my gosh. Because you might be bidding a bunch. And then if everyone else thinks they're going to do really poorly, then actually it still remains a trick-taking game. And you're feeling great because it's like, oh yeah, I thought I was going to take a bunch of tricks. I'll take a lot of tricks. So I love that. And speaking to like player-defined games, that is a huge player-defined game where the players are really in the driver's seat on what you're about to play. And the trick play is mostly normal. There's some cards that I think it's a nice game to where it gives you these cards that will kind of be stronger. Like you'll know they're stronger. Like there's these one cards that you can play whenever that always win. They could lose to different cards, which definitely happens. But it helps you be informed a little bit more than normal on a trick-taking game that you could win with this card, or you probably will win with this card. But then it gives you the out to where you possibly might not, which is great. But yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
Super simple. I think some of those ones that are real big hits are like very close to a super simple game, but just a slight twist.
Twist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was like the magical number was like 12, right? So if the total bid was less than 12, your tricks are, I forget if it was up or down, but
yeah,
like you wanted to win more. And then, if it was exactly 12, you had the last bidder had to bid something to either change their bid by one, go down by one, or go up by one, because it can never be exactly 12.
So it works off that idea of, and this can kind of be a complaint some players have of bidding trick-taking games, is if everyone bids correctly, then it becomes like this cooperative game where it's like, okay, well, I know you want 4 tricks, I want 6 tricks, and there's like,
let's work together.
Yeah, there's 10 tricks left. Let's try to like make this work. So there are only 12 tricks in the game, and so it kind of forces it to where someone's going to mess up, or someone's not going to do what they want to do.
Right.
Which is nice. It's nice to see a system put in place to kind of fix an issue that people might have, but to do it in an elegant way, which I thought Baronda did well.
Yeah, I really liked Baronda as well. And I was kind of hoping you would talk about it because
yes,
I didn't, just because I wanted to throw my Makai Fuda on here because it was just so the monsters,
Yes, the monsters. And there's something, I mean, kind of like what you just talked about. with the 8-bit graphics. There's something fun in Baronda where the art on that one is kind of like very colorful, very like fun. And the bidding card, which is one of the most fun bidding cards I've ever seen, was this sliding. So it was someone holding up a bowl with like fruit on it. Is that on like the Chiquita banana logo? Like I'm trying to think.
It was kind of like that. It was, that's what it was reminiscent of. Yeah,
reminiscent of. And the more you bid was the more fruit that was like piling up onto the bowl. That was so cute. It was a really fun like production. It's fun to have like fun, cute moments.
Yeah, and it's just with cards and art. Yeah,
two cards and
that
art.
was really cool.
Yeah, because it leads to like players having fun at the table, right? Where you're like, hey, how much fruit do you think you
Yeah.
You know, great. So yeah, that was Baronda. It was a hoot. People loved it too.
Cool. So the next game on my list was another popular game, or at least popular in my world, and that is Sumida River. And this is another 2023 release designed by Mashi Kamaru, and it's published by Mashika. And I think the player count, it was 3 to 4, if I recall, for this one. This is a card shedding game. So you're trying to get rid of your hands first. You're not trying to get rid of your hands. Sorry. You're trying to get rid of the cards in your hands first. So in a 4-player game, the way it works is if you're first to go out, you score 3 points. If you're second to go out, you score 2 points. And then third gets 1. And whoever's last just gets nothing. So you are trying to score the most victory points after a certain amount of rounds. I don't remember how many rounds. But the deck has 52 cards. There are 3 threes, all the way up to 10 tens. And there are 2 suits, black and red. And on the table, you have these 4 cards that are placed, I guess, horizontal. It makes this river. And on the left side of the card, it's black. You can only play black cards. Black combinations, I'll say. And then on the right side of each card, you can only play red card combinations. And so the top card is single card, meaning on the left side, you can play a single black card. On the right side, you can play a single red card. The next card in the river is 2 card combinations, but they kind of mix it up. So on the black side, you have to play 2 of a kind. So you can play 2 8s. On the right side, you have to play a 2 card run. So you can play like 4, 5, 9, 10. And then going down on the third card in the river, you have to play 3 cards on either side. And that one has a special rule where on the black side, you can actually play 1 red card. So you can play 2 black cards and a red card, or 3 black cards. And on the red side, similarly, you can play 2 red cards and a black card, or 3 red cards. And then on the fourth one, you're playing 4 cards. And I think one side was 4 of a kind. I don't remember which one. Maybe the black side was 4 of a kind. And the red side was then a 4-card run. And there was like some special thing that happens. But the way this game works, there are a couple like hooky things. So usually when you're playing these like climbing shedding games, you're trying to like, oh, I play a single 3, you're beating that. We're just playing around on the table and we're beating each other's combos. Maybe it stops at some point. Maybe it keeps going until somebody can't beat. But this, because you're playing cards into these spaces on the river, you play until either there's no space for you to play cards or you can't beat the combination. But it's interesting because I could lead the hand and play 3 8s. I could play 3 red 8s. And so now I'm saying, okay, everybody else, 8 is the bare minimum of card you can play for any combo. And nobody can play in this 3 red card slot anymore because I've blocked it. My cards are there. So you have to play something with an 8 or higher in one of the available slots. So maybe, Taylor, you play a black 9 on the single card slot. So now somebody else could play a pair of black 9s on, So you have this whole thing where you're playing combinations only to the available spots on the river. And then you also have to like make sure you're playing you can't go below the lowest card.
Right. The climbing.
The climbing card. So I thought that was like really, really neat. And I haven't seen climbing shedding kind of like done that way ever. And then you also have this hand exchange thing you could do. So before you start each hand, everybody takes a look at their cards and then we're going to all vote. You say 1, 2, 3. And the question is, do you want to trade your hand of cards? So if you, on the count of 1, 2, 3, and you stick your thumb up, you're saying you want to trade your hand of cards. So let's say we're playing a 4-player game. Taylor and I are the only ones that thumbs up. Everybody else said, no, I'm going to keep my hand. We get to take a wild card. So everybody starts the game with 4 wild cards, 2 black and 2 red on the table. So we get to take one of those, put it in the hand, and then we swap hands. Yeah. And then we vote again. Do you want to keep this hand, or not keep this hand? Do you want to trade? Thumbs up or thumbs down? So there's this whole thing where you can exchange cards. And when you decide to make that exchange, you're adding a wild card to your hand, which is giving you some flexibility. But ultimately, again, you're trying to get rid of your hand of cards the fastest. And if you're the one who plays the combination that no one can beat, the whole river will clear. And then you get to start again, which is making it easier for you to kind of get rid of your cards because you're getting to play more. So I kind of found this one to be on the medium light side. And I would say, if this one has an English version at some point, I think people can get into this if you played Scout.
Yeah.
Maybe it's, I think you could get into it if you played Scout,
Right. It seems like this, like the Scout and Pass in Scout, where you use that token, that's almost like those wilds, right? Or like the trading. It's like, is this the right time to pass my hand and get it back? I love in that game that if players tie, which is possibly often because the scoring isn't too different, right? You could,
1, 2,
you
or
get
3.
1, 2, or 3, right? You can get first and then third, and you get 4 points tied, right? Is the tiebreaker is the fewest amount of wilds, so it kind of a little bit incentivizes you to use those wilds and to trade. Yeah, and I think, did you ever have it to where someone was the only trader or trader? Oh, geez, the only person who traded. Oh, sorry,
it's happened multiple times.
Exactly, but the only person to trade where they get to add as many wilds as they want into their hand.
No, I haven't seen that. And that is a fun twist on that because, if you're the only person with your thumb up, you get to add as many wild cards that you still have available into your hand, which is kind of spicy. It's like you don't want somebody to be able to do that,
Yes. And what's wild is you only get a certain amount of wilds. Or what's wild?
That is wild.
That is wild. Is you only get a certain amount of hands, wilds per the game. You don't actually replenish. So if you trade too much, you can't trade anymore.
Oh, right. Because those 4 cards are for the whole game.
Yeah.
That is right, sir. That is right.
Yeah. Because I had someone a little trade happy. They're like, let's just keep going.
Yeah.
And they...
A super trader.
Hidden trader. Open trader game. Yeah. And they just were, they're trading a bunch. And then they realized, when I get a bad hand, because they just didn't have any wilds, they're like, I have to keep this. I was like, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's brutal. It's that's why I could see it's a little medium because you might put yourself in a hole. Players might be like,
yep.
Yeah.
But I thought this was really, really clever and inventive for a climb. And I'm not a big climbing shedder kind of gal.
Sure.
That's not I tend to prefer trick-taking games. But this one, I was like, ooh, I really like this. This might be the one. Yes. Now, I like a lot of climbing shedders. I'm not going to lie. I do like a lot of them, but I definitely lean more on the trick-taking side. But this one kind of stuck out to me as really special.
Yeah. It's something to where, so we've talked about trick-taking and must follow and things like that. In trick-taking, there's must not follow, meaning if I play a certain suit, you can play any suit besides that one. And in this one, it's kind of must not meld. It's you have to play a different meld every time.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to think about it in that kind of unique way. The designer was actually someone who was super kind at Tokyo Game Market. They were like, hey, let's meet up and chat. And we had lunch and we went and got ice cream one day. And
that's so cool.
Sweetheart. They had this very experimental trick-taking game that they gave me. They're like, play it. Might be really weird. And the premise was it's a word game. So you play a word and your hands are words, but it's a trick-taking game. And when you follow suit, you don't know what you're following suit on. I led macaroni and someone plays monster truck and another person plays leaf blower. and you have a debate at the table like, well, what was more must follow with macaroni? Was it Monster Truck or Beast Blow? Yeah, it's wild.
Wow.
It's wild.
That sounds cool. That
Yeah,
sounds very experimental.
Yeah, super experimental. So I think this design, Sumida River, was his experimental kind of climbing jetting, and it works.
It
pretty well.
works.
I
Works
like it as well.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is Sumida River.
Awesome. And I guess speaking of, my next game is Iyadosu by the same designer. So it's by Mashikamaru.
Oh,
yes.
nice.
Super weird.
Not planned. Not planned.
It was not planned. It was wild how that happened. And publisher Mashika, who it's the same person. It's kind of like his design circle that we talked about.
Cool.
This one I'd say is more medium because the hook to it is once you get your hand, you can't move it, kind of like Scout. You can't move your hand. But you get this card and you bid with it on how many tricks you think you're going to win. And you count the number of cards. So they say you think you're going to win 4 tricks. You put this card 4 cards to the left of your hand. And what's crazy is to the left of that card is must follow and to the right is may follow.
Whoa.
So it's like this. There's a lot of other intricacies with it, but it's this wild game where you're like bidding with your hand and stuff. And that's just the elevator pitch, but essentially it was wonderful to play with a lot of people because at the retreat, there are people who love trick taking games, right? There are these kind of not experts, but like people who love getting into the complex versions. And that game lends itself well to knowing how to bid because you're bidding and kind of creating what your hand is going to be at the same time, which was really, really cool. Yeah, it was really, really fun. I had a great time playing it.
Iyadosu.
Yeah, it's a wild one.
Cool. So the next game I'm going to talk about, Taylor, are you ready to get extreme?
Yes, this was when I was like, wink, wink, because you're like, it's pretty extreme. I'm like,
yeah,
we're about to get really extreme, wink, wink. Yeah.
I loved my one play of extreme tricks.
Extreme!
Extreme tricks. This is a 2023 release designed by Masato Usugi. Mm-hmm. And this is the same designer who designed Paper Tales and Welcome to the Dungeon, which I played both of those.
Yeah. They have wonderful designs. They did Lunar and Ortrek from All Play.
I didn't make that connection.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Definitely so many people who are into this genre of games might know this designer. And another exciting thing about this game, I played the Japanese version, which was published by I Was Game. But in 2025, we're going to see an English release from All Play, and it's going to be called Sick Tricks. So that's really exciting. So if this game sounds exciting to you, you'll be able to get it in, or more easily, maybe if you're in the US, find it in 2025. Yes. But which seems like forever away. But you know, these years just kind of blast by. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a big new scoop. I love that.
Yeah. Hot scoops, extreme scoops, you might say, you will get on the BGG podcast. No. So this is a 3 to 4 player trick-taking game, and it is skateboard themed. So if you see the artwork for the extreme tricks, there's like I feel like a skateboard. Let me see if I don't have a picture handy, but I feel like it was like a skateboard with flames or something. And All Play is going to keep the skateboarding theme and call it Sick Tricks. So basically in the game, you are trying to bid on how many objectives you think you can take, which is kind of like different skateboard tricks you think you can land. And your goal is to have the most points at the end of the game. So you're really trying to like hit your bid. And I think the game is either 3 or 4 rounds, maybe 4 rounds, or it might vary by player count or something like that. Yeah. So each hand is 12 tricks, and these 12 tricks are split into 3 stages. So stage 1 is tricks 1 through 4, stage 2 is tricks 5 through 8, and stage 3 is tricks 9 through 12. Mm-hmm. And on the table, you're going to have 3 rows of cards that are relevant to each stage, and each row has 4 objective cards. In the version I played, 2 are pink, 2 are blue. The pink objectives are things that you can complete during the round while you're playing. And then the blue objectives are end of round objectives. So you evaluate them after you finish that stage. So after you get your hand of cards, everybody has this set of cubes of their color. You're going to figure out how many tricks you think, not how many tricks you're going to win, how many objectives you think you can complete. And the thing here is, before the round starts, after you set aside a certain amount of cubes, you're going to take half of those cubes and you have to commit them to objectives. So when you're making this decision, you're kind of thinking about like, hey, I know I can do this one and this one and this one. And I think maybe I can do 2 more. So I'll bid 5 cubes, that I think that's safe. Yeah. And then I'll place my initial half on these, which I'm like pretty confident I can nail. And these objectives are like, win a trick with a diamond or win a trick with a 5 or less, and things like similar things that you would see in the crew. Yeah. This one's not cooperative though. We are independent rival skateboarders. Yeah. So after everybody, does this, you say I set aside 6 cubes, and then we go around the table in turn order and you place half of those cubes onto objectives. And they sit at the top of the card. And if you don't meet the objectives of the ones that you place at the start of the hand, they're going to be -1 point each.
Right.
In this game, every time you make an objective, it's worth 1. Well, no, I'm not going to say that. That's not true. That's not true. I'm lying. But anyway, the point is, the ones that you said at the beginning, usually you're pretty confident about. So you mostly will score those. But then the half of cubes that are left in your little stash, we'll call it your reserve, that's when it gets tricky, because you're going to start playing your cards. And the minute you meet one of your mid-stage objectives that you already had a cube on, you just slide that cube down. It's positive points, baby. Ooh. Positive points. But the minute you complete an objective that you don't have a cube on, you're going to have to take a cube from your reserve and put it on there. That's it's still positive points, baby. But then when you run out of cubes and you still keep hitting objectives, now it's -2 points, baby.
I love it, baby. It's like, sorry.
And then at the end, so let's say we just played our first 4 tricks. Now we check to see about those end of stage objectives. And again, if you already had a cube on it and you did it, you just slide your cube down. And if you didn't have a cube on it and you did it, now you're pulling a cube from your reserve if you have one. When you don't have any more cubes in your reserve, you take them from your main supply, and those cubes go in the -2 point box of the objective. Ugh. And likewise, if you still have cubes in your reserve at the end of the round, they are negative points. So you are really trying to make sure whatever amount of tricks you think you're going to land with your little skateboard, you want to make sure you land them. And, some of the things are in stage 3, it'll be play a club. Well, maybe somebody early in the round leads clubs and bleeds you of those cards, and you don't have any. Right? Wah, wah, wah. Yeah. So it's kind of risky. And the other neat thing I'll say about this game before I want to hear your thoughts on it too, Taylor. But the other neat thing is, so after you finish that one hand of cards, after you play those 12 tricks, the objective cards change. So now you wipe the board and you put out different objective cards. And there's a way in this version where each of the objective cards are numbered. So the lower number, you place them out in ascending order. So the lower number ones will be in stage 1 up to the higher number ones, which will be in stage 2. And there are always 2 of each type. But yeah, this game was awesome. I love trying to predict how many objectives I can hit based on my cards, but I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I don't know what Taylor's going to do,
Yes. Oh, totally. I think what it does so well, and what you just said with the setup, is making sure there's like a crafted experience, but it's always still random, right?
Yeah.
And you get all these kind of new setups. I personally love the theme of like you are bidding on half of them, and
Yeah.
you'll unexpectedly, or you're committing to half of them, sorry, and you'll unexpectedly do ones that you didn't expect. That kind of happens every game.
Yes.
And I love thematically, like you're about to do a trick and you're like, I'm going to do a kickflip. And then you're like, oh, I did like a Madonna. Is that what I want? Like,
or just like wiped out or something.
yeah, exactly. Right. And you're like, oh, I guess the crowd is kind of impressed. Like you're hitting your bid with something you didn't expect. I love that.
Yeah.
But the flow of it is something I think about a lot on the flight home and ever since I played. It becomes there's things different people love about trick taking, what they look for in trick taking, and something I think the person who organized the retreat loves about it is where every trick is interesting, and it's so true. Like I love trick taking games where you can just kind of sit back and not every trick is interesting, and you have that leniency to have kind of a more relaxing time, a more casual hangout, but in extreme tricks because they are extreme. It's not casual tricks. Yeah.
No.
To the point where you're like, oh no, I'm in the stage. I can't play a 3 or lower because then I accidentally just did a kickflip and I don't want to do a kickflip.
Right.
Yeah. It's so funny to me. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. You were like engaged the entire hand. Like from the start, we're all simultaneously thinking about this decision of how many cubes we want to set aside. Mm-hmm. And then usually at that point, which ones you want to commit. But then maybe seeing what other people commit, like as it goes around, you might be like, oh, maybe not if this person's committing to something in stage 3, Right.
Like winning 4 tricks. You're like, oh, they have a better hand than I do. And I think the beauty of it is every trick has an arc.
Yeah.
And then every stage has an arc, which is every 1/3 of the hand. And then the whole hand has an arc.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
It's super.
Like layers. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really fun to like mess with people or set people where you're like, oh, you think you're going to be able to win with a club? I'm just going to like, in a certain stage. On an earlier stage, I'm just going to lead all the clubs. Like, oh, I see what you're trying to do. It's really fun.
Now, Taylor, I have an important question.
Yes.
Would you consider this game extreme?
I would definitely. If I can't think of an extremer game, really. That's a good steal. Oh.
Yeah, I really, and I'm gonna say I do have a little bias because I won my first game, so I'm currently undefeated at Extreme Tricks. But I really, really loved it. Like I love games where you have these objectives, and the way it's done here is just like really, really cool. And I cannot wait to. I hope I can get a copy of Extreme Tricks at some point, but. If not, I'm stoked for Sick Tricks. Yeah, it's going to be sick. It's going to be sick.
Yes. And you can say that you're the most extreme trick taker at the table.
Yeah. So that is Extreme Tricks.
Oh,
what is the last game for you, Taylor?
Oh, my last one. Well, I was thinking about complexity, right? Like trying to form this lineup of games around the theme of complexity. And I went on BGG. And I searched both trick taking games and climbing shooting games, ranked on complexity. And it seems like the heaviest one in trick taking was Bridge. And the heaviest one in climbing shedding, which is the game I'm picking, is Tichu. So
nice.
Tichu has been around since 1991. And it's designed by Urs Holstetler and published by so many people at this point. Like on BGG, you go to the publisher and it says 15. It's just like a name.
Yeah. It's been around.
That classic thing on BGG where you're like, like there's so many different editions. In fact, one of the cool things at the retreat was someone had a Japanese version of Tichu, and it was really cool to see how it was made and have different ones. And I know there's people who have Tichu decks, like custom decks, and
that's cool
from Amazon. But so. The hook to Tichu, it's a climbing shedding game where it's partnership. And I think my last kind of level of complexity is, do you have a partner or not changes so much. Like I just mentioned, Bridge and Tichu being the most
extreme.
Yeah, the most
genres.
Extreme. Yes, the most extreme and complex games in their category for BGG, like BGG raiders will say that. And they both are partnerships, right? Where you're trying to intuit what your partner wants from you, what your partner wants to do, trying to signal to them. Like, it's interesting to have a game, have it be complex, and then add, oh, also you're on a team, you can't really communicate with another person. It adds just another layer, to this
Cool.
this onion of complexity. But so it's a team game. You are trying to go out with your teammate. The best thing you can do is both you and your teammate go out before the other two players do. And then there's some points on cards. There's some bombs, which, are wild combos. There's so many different layers to the game. But what was wonderful was I was in a Tichu tournament at that retreat. And it's just great to have, again, another level of complexity is playing the same players and playing players who know the game super, super, super well. Again, because when they play super, super well and they're at this caliber, it's another level of,
That's
okay,
so
well, I
cool.
know this player is an aggressive player. I'm going to pass a worse card to them and a better card to the other player who might not try to, be too aggressive. It was so much fun. Just
Deep.
to, yeah. Tichu, I would say easily one of the heaviest climbers, up there with, Haggis and stuff. Just an absolute joy. So yeah, that's my last game. Yeah.
Cool. So I back right when I was starting to kind of work part-time and write in BGG news, I the timing worked out really well where I got to go to a little BGG retreat, and some people in the BGG team, I don't remember exactly who, but taught me Tichu for the first time. And I loved it. And I bought the app. I got my own deck. And then I never played it again. And that was 2020. So I need to get back to this one. I do have a few friends in LA that love Tichu.
Is it like a lifestyle game for them? I know there's
yeah. So I might do that, but also the last game I'm going to talk about though might pull me in even a little bit more.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, so I played a game called La Bâtarde, which I believe translates to the bastard. And this is a French trick-taking game, which was gifted to me. A listener of the pod, friend of mine who reached out to me sometime last year after I did a trick-taking related episode with Jonathan Cox from John Gets Games.
Oh, yes.
Roman from France reached out and said, if you love trick-taking games, I would love to meet up with you in Essen if you're going to Essen, because I want to show you some games. And I was like, that sounds awesome. So we exchanged a couple messages, and then we actually did get to meet up in Essen, and Roman kindly handed me a copy of La Bâtarde. And I have since that moment, I've been wanting to play it. So first I had to get the English rules because it's a French game. And then he also recommended playing it with a higher player count, 5 or more. So I tried to take it a couple places. I remember I brought it with me, I think, to PAX Unplugged. But I wasn't finding myself in situations where I could get it played. I was also a little intimidated because I read the rules, but there were some things I'm like, ooh, we got to sit down and kind of play this to figure it out a little bit. Right. But I'm jumping ahead. This is a game from 2004. It's designed by Jules Marconier. And it's listed as self-published on BGG, but it is on the labâtarde.com website, distributed by Wilson Zhu. And it plays with 3 to 8 players. Again, it's a French trick-taking game. And it's one of these games where you want to hit your bid as often as possible. So there are never positive points awarded. Oh, I guess 0 if you consider 0 positive. But what happens is you lose 1 point per trick that you're off. So if you bid, I'm going to win 3 tricks, and you win 5, you're off 2, so you lose 2 points. Of course, there's a way that can be doubled and quadrupled. So maybe this is pretty extreme. I don't know. But after you get your hands of cards, you're going to bid on how many tricks you think you're going to take. But this is also how we're going to decide on what the trump suit is for the round, or trump suits, potentially. And there's another little twist in the game where when you do play with 5 or more players, you play with 2 decks. So you play with 2 matching decks, and one deck has the rank of the card underlined. So we were playing, so I played 2 6-player games, so we were using both decks. And initially we got it wrong, where I told everybody the underlined version of the card, like if I play a King of Spades, but it would be an R, a Roy, I guess, in French. Yeah. If I play the R of Spade underline and someone else throws an R of Spade, the simple version without the underline, the underline is always stronger. That's wrong, because you kind of determine that, you figure that out during the bidding process of how many tricks you're going to win and when Trump is going to be set. So this so far is probably sounding like the Dream Theater or Mars Volta of trick taking games. And if that's how it sounds, you're right.
Yeah,
no, it's not that crazy, but I think it was a little harder for us because the cards. So let me tell you about the cards. The cards in the game, you don't have any cards with numbers. So here's another bit of complexity. You have a cat, which is the weakest card, then a dog, which is the next weakest. And then you have groupings. You have a set of carnival cards. So you have a juggler, a musician, and then the fool. And then you have the royalty cards, which are similar to Jack, Queen, King, but the French version. So you have the V, the valet, the cavalier, the dame, and the Roy. And the Roy is equal to the king in English cards. So that's the order. But for the Trump suit only, the carnival suits are stronger than those royalty suits. So you kind of have to remember, you flip them around. Thankfully, the graphic design on the cards is really good. And they have these little pips. So the regular royalty suits have full colored, solid colored pips. And then the carnival cards have hollow pips. So, if hearts are Trump, I'm going to know that my hollow pip cards are stronger than my full solid pips. But these are all things that are adding complexity. Again, there are no numbers on any of these cards. So that's one of the hardest things getting started. Yeah. But then let's talk about the bidding some more. So after you get your hand of cards, the other thing that's wild about this, and we played the full game. Technically, you can play as many hands as you want till, we play 4 times around. But we went extreme with this one. And we played the full game, which in a 6-player game, the first hand you deal 7, second hand you deal 8, 9, up to 12, and then you go back 12 to 7. So we played 12 hands of cards. I think the first game we skipped the second 12, and we just started going back down with 11. But it took us 2 hours. Yeah. But it was so fun. There's so many moments in this game where you're just oh snap. So let me keep going a little bit here. So after you get your hand of cards, we're gonna let's say I'm first to bid this round. I'm gonna say how many tricks I think I'm gonna win, which suit I think I want to be Trump, and then also if I want the underlined cards or the simple version to be stronger. So I'm setting 3 things, and you can bid on no trumps at all, no suits are Trump, and you can also bid on all suits are Trump. Then it comes to you, Taylor. You're next. You could say, okay, let's say I said hearts. You could say, yeah, I'm cool with hearts, and you'll just say okay, I'll just bid. I'm not going to win any tricks. So you can just take, and they have these chips in the game that you'll indicate how many tricks you think you're going to win. So maybe you say no, and you're cool with hearts being Trump. But then it comes around to, let's say, Tony the Tiger. And Tony the Tiger says, I want diamonds to be Trump. So then Tony needs to bid more tricks than I did to now change the Trump suit. And that can be done. And anybody at any point that didn't make the current bidded Trump can knock on the table and say, I eschew, and lock in the Trump. Wow. And then we all kind of have to follow that, and we make our bid on tricks. And similar to something we were talking about earlier, the amount of cards you have in your hand, we cannot have bids equal to that. So if we're playing a 7-card hand, and mind you, when you're playing a 7-card hand in a 6-player game, there are a lot of cards out of play, which is even harder to kind of accurately predict your bid and everything. Yeah. Okay, so the bidding is wild, you can see.
Yes.
And then before the trick starts, the player who, again, declared what the trump is can now say that they want to quadruple it. Oh, I did not mention, when you stop the bid and say, I eschew, and knock on the table, that is doubling the negative points you'll get for the round for missing your bid. So then one person who set the trump can, and I think that's right, can then quadruple it. Wow. Choose to quadruple it. So the bidding is just wild and so interesting. It's like a whole separate game, just that round of bidding for this game, which was like really awesome, especially the more you understood how the game works.
Yeah.
And then when you play the game, it's just a standard trick-taking game, of course. Not really. It's must follow, must trump, and must trump higher. So if you have trump, you have to play a higher trump than anybody who played a trump before you.
Yes.
And if not, you still need to play trump if you have it. And then otherwise, it's just kind of a slough is what they call it, right? Where you the card is just going to not be considered towards winning. So you have all of this going on. And then don't forget, I said any trump suit is reversed, meaning the carnival characters. At that point, the fool is the strongest card. Right. And this game is so cool. Like, it is crazy. It is just like not for people who just want those like simple little games, but I can totally see this being a game where you play every Friday night. Like, there's some people who play poker every week. Like, you could play this every week. Like, the 3 of the people in my first game of 6, including myself, we all were like, we wanted to play it the next day. We're like, la bâtarde. Wow. Yes. And then the next day we played, we ended up taking a break halfway because we started like just before people were going to dinner and stuff.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
And so people would walk by when we came back and we're playing the second half. They're just like, you guys are still playing this game? And we're just like, yeah, we are. And we're just loving it. So we had like a couple of funny quotes in the game too. Like, because we have this whole underline situation. It's like that can bite you in the butt if you forget that like either the underlined cards are stronger or they're weaker this round. So that's something you're thinking about. And then another quote was a pet hand. So if you have a bunch of the cats and dogs, because they usually don't win, that's super fun. But then it's even more fun when somebody does accidentally win with a dog. And they're just like, oh yeah, I'm not going to win. So you predict your bids thinking like, there's no way this dog is going to like win a trick. Right. And then all of a sudden those like must trump, must beat or whatever rules kick in and you win with a dog. It is just like wild and crazy. So this game, I really, 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 really dig it. I know like one person already, like I told them to check Philibert and they found copies. So they bought a couple copies. So you can get it in Philibert on philibert.net, which is cool. But I am really excited to like start introducing this to more people. So I was hoping to get to play it with you, but like, well, next time.
Or if, next con.
That is exactly what I mean, because we're going to see each other more this year, which I'm excited about.
And if you need 5 people or 6 people, like a con is like the time to do it. Yeah. And it sounds like a con game. Like you're having crazy moments and like, is it one of those games where like the inside jokes just start
yeah, because some of them carried over from day to day. And the other thing that was like kind of interesting, which I'm going to keep my eye on, is both games, the person who is keeping score, which was different each game, won the game. I'm like, what kind of sus stuff is that?
What's happening here? Yeah, what are we talking about here?
And then I was kind of joking because like both days, I don't know if I came in dead last, but I definitely did not win, and I ended up with negative 22 points. But in both games, so I'm like, technically, doesn't that mean I won? Because I like hit my bid from the first game.
Yeah. You got exactly negative 22.
I got exactly negative 22 both games. The first game, like I said, we only played 11 hands accidentally, and then the second game we played the full 12, and I ended up at negative 22. That is the score to beat if you are me. But yeah, this game is just like super fantastic, and I'm like very appreciative, Roman, for like you giving me this gift and introducing it to me. And if it starts spreading in the US, all of a sudden it's probably from this past weekend.
It's going to be on the hotness.
Yeah.
The bâtarde. Wait, so who's the bâtarde? Who is it? The winner of the game or the person?
That's a good question. I'm just going to say it wasn't me.
Okay. Because there's like a Russian game called Durak where it's like that means fool, and it's the person who lost. So I was like, oh, is like bâtarde like what you don't want? Is it like what?
I think it's kind of like every time somebody was off, and I'm not gonna lie, there were so many moments where I would, well, not me, but like other people would either on that very last card of the round would either hit their bid or miss their bid by one.
Yes.
And those moments were just like so exciting. Yes. Well, mostly when you were the one hitting your bid, but and not missing your bid.
Yeah, it sounds like there's so much like schadenfreude. Like you're just watching other people just be like, oh, are you kidding me?
Yes, and imagine quadrupling.
Yes,
quadrupling, and if you miss your bid by 2, you lose 8 points. That is extreme.
We've hit it. That is extreme. And I will say an unexpected complexity level is the French R, and remembering that means king, and like you are playing a French game. That always trips me up too. Yeah.
But like I said, the graphic designer of this game nailed it because they put these pips, and the minute we understood the pips, it was like, okay, this is what's going on. So I'll sort my cards in my hand this way. But of course, like it'll still bite you in the butt because like there was one moment I had the R underline, and then I forgot it wasn't the trump suit. So I'm like, I got the strongest card. Like I know I can win at least one trick, but no, it wasn't the trump suit. So it backfired.
I love that. It sounds like, again, like this lifestyle game. Like you could imagine there's places that play La Bâtarde weekly, and
I'm like if we had another day, we would have played it again.
Yes,
we would have played it again.
Exactly. That's like the beauty of trick-taking. So you showed me, and I was like, oh, I'd never heard of that game. Yeah. And like I couldn't imagine a genre, like if you're super into a genre and like not like deck building, you're like someone's like, oh, here's Dominion, you're like, oh, I never heard of that. And I have like a Dominion channel or a deck building channel where it's like, I never heard of Dominion. But like that was one of the nice things to hear, because I think I walked by you guys playing it, and it was like always laughing, always having fun. It's like a lively game, it sounds like. So I love that gem that came out. What a great surprise.
And there's just something nice about like nobody realized, like if you told somebody, oh, do you want to sit down and play a 2-hour trick-taking game? Most people would probably run away, but like we just all enjoyed each other's companies for both of those games, and we just had a blast. Like I don't even know how, like what exactly it was, but it was just fun, and we all enjoyed it. Like those moments of seeing someone get screwed, those moments of you just making your bid is like so satisfying. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this game, and I'm like definitely gonna like be playing it more regularly now that I know how it works. And I hope anyone out there who's listening, Roman, looking at you, if I got any rules wrong, please let me know. Totally. But like I think we got it right. But yeah, it was fantastic. So that is La Bâtarde, and I wanted to end on a note of like one of the extremes of games that I played recently. And this one is definitely like complex, but you can figure it out, especially if you play with the same group and make it a regular thing. Like it's a really, really enjoyable game.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Well, Taylor, I've been wanting to have you on this podcast for a long time. So I'm really glad like we finally did it, and we did it after such a joyful weekend of playing a bunch of card games together, you know?
Yeah, it seemed so wonderful to segue from that to this podcast, and it's just on my mind, you know, my head's swimming in cards and suits, and you know, like when you play a game like Rock Band or something a lot, and you start seeing like things moving at you, or like Tetris, like you dream as the shapes. So I'm like closing my eyes and I'm seeing suits and stuff. So I'm in this mindset. I feel bad. I noticed we have talked for a while, but it's so much fun.
Yeah, I know. It happens. I'm a chatty person, and usually like I'm always chatting with people who are also excited about games. So we go on. So yeah, so we'll be done for now. But like not forever.
No, not at all. So thank you so much for having me. I could wax poetic on this, and especially complexity on this. Like, I think that's such an interesting topic.
Yeah, it's cool to think about.
Yes, exactly. It's so much fun. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Board Game Geek podcast, produced and edited by Candice Harris. Special thanks to Matt Fonda for editing and mixing our music. Be sure to visit us on the web at boardgamegeek.com. You can also find us on YouTube, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitch under Board Game Geek. You can reach us by email at podcast@boardgamegeek.com. Thanks for listening and happy gaming!